Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited today to record on the Portland Trailblazers, a team that I think not only is slated to have a pretty solid season this upcoming year, but is in a position to make a huge pivot for the franchise, one that will push them toward more winning and a lot of winning at a high level going into the future. If you guys do enjoy the content in today's video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, also hype the video. It helps me out a lot. And let's go forward into what makes me say this. So for the last couple of years, I've recorded these Sleeping Giants videos. In 2023, I recorded one in the 76ers. Ultimately, Paul George signed there in free agency that next offseason. Last year, I recorded one on the Houston Rockets. In that video, I predicted Devin Booker would ultimately be a Houston Rocket via trade. They ultimately traded for Kevin Durant, so I was on the right team. Made a trade with the Phoenix Suns, just wasn't for Devin Booker. He ended up extending with Phoenix, but they did go out and still make that big splash, trade away Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and bring in a future first ballot Hall of Famer, Kevin Durant. And this video is the continuation of that series, and I'm 2 for 2 at this point. I called the Philadelphia 76ers big time transaction. I talked about the Houston Rockets being a team that was going to make that big splash. And this year, the team for me is the Portland Trailblazers. I think they are just so well positioned. And if you look at their cap table, it's pretty easy to understand why I feel the way that I do. First of all, they have a lot of young talent on contracts that are very team friendly. Of course, the big one is Denny Avdia. He is the third player down in that list of their cap table, and I think if you look at Denny Avdia's contract, you might view that as one of the best value contracts in the NBA, and that's because it flat out is. He took a huge step forward last season in his first year with the Blazers, and I think going forward, not only could he just arguably be flat out the best player on this team, but he could be a true all-star or near all-star caliber player in terms of impact, his value on winning, and the skill set that he brings night in, night out as a plus defender, someone who also can score the basketball, play make with the ball in his hands a bit, run pick and roll. He is just a multi-talented wing, and in a league where it's hard to get your hands on those types of players, the deal that they made with Washington still looks like a genius decision. I said it in the moment that they made that trade, and I think that they've really been able to build off of that. The trade of Anthony Simons for Drew Holiday, I do think makes this team better this upcoming season. You look at the team control on some other guys. Of course, Toumani Camara was such an instrumental piece in that trade when they sent DeAndre Ayton, or when they acquired DeAndre Ayton, from the Phoenix Suns in the Damian Lillard trade. Of course, Camara has turned into one of the best players on the Portland Trailblazers, one of the best defensive players in the entire league at this point. He's an absolutely awesome player who is taking some significant offensive strides forward over the last couple of years, and of course we know what he can do on the defensive end of the court. Then you have some big question marks, right? You have Shaedon Sharpe going into his final year of his rookie contract. He will be a restricted free agent this upcoming offseason. He should be in line to get paid. But then you have some of the other young players. Scoot Henderson, who's going to miss the beginning of the season with that hamstring injury. This is a big prove-it year for him. And of course, it's unfortunate that he's starting kind of out of labor here on the injured list and not able to really perform, because it's going to put him behind the 8 ball, so to speak, at the beginning of the year. But I still am a believer in Scoot Henderson, watching him in person, seeing the way that he moves and plays. I do think he processes the game a little bit quicker, and with Anthony Simons out of the question and out of the picture, I think it kind of alleviates it and clarifies Scoot Henderson's role on this team a little bit. You obviously have some young big men, Donovan Clingan, who I like a lot. They also have Hanson Yang, who I'm a big fan of as well. I think that there's some real value in his DHO hub ability. So I do think if you look at the Blazers from just a young talent perspective, there's a lot to like, but you also need to look at the veterans and especially the tradable contracts, and that's where we start to focus in on guys like Drew Holiday and Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant did not seem super enthused at Blazers Media Day, and that's okay, because the Blazers are looking at him as a walking trade exception. Now, he still does have 3 seasons left on his contract. It was a contract I did not like when the Blazers ultimately signed him to it, and it hasn't aged well either, but it is a huge number that they're going to be able to trade in the future. Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be at the trade deadline? No, but I think as soon as you get to next offseason, you're looking at a 1+1 at that point, so ultimately a 2-year deal. Teams are going to be willing to eat that salary in a big trade. And then Drew Holiday, that's your other huge salary to incorporate into a deal. If you do the math here between Drew Holiday and Jeremy Grant, that is going into next offseason about $68 million of tradable salary just from two players. Now, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get traded together, but it gives you optionality going into a trade package for, say, a $40-50 million player where, hey, let's start the package with Jeremy Grant's contract. And then, hey, who do you want from our young guys? What draft capital can we work with? And this is where you're starting to see the understanding of what I'm looking at here and saying this is why the Blazers are the team that's destined to strike next in a big trade. They have young pieces. They have a team that's trending toward winning. And what they're truly missing is a top 5, top 10-ish player in the world to get them over that hump and take them to the next level. And they have the contracts, they have the draft capital and the means to go and find that player in the trade market if one actually becomes available. And there's a few that we do need to talk about for sure. But, of course, before we do that, we need to talk about that Blazers young core a little bit more. Again, this is really the basis of what you're betting on going forward. The only reason we're going to talk about the Blazers as a possible buyer in the near future is because of the belief in these young guys. And this is instrumental. This is what separates them from a team like Brooklyn right now. Obviously, the Nets have a lot of flexibility. They have a ton of draft picks. They're not ready to start competing. The Blazers, I do think, are really starting to push that envelope a little bit. They're right there knocking at the door. This team's going to win 35 to 40-ish games this season, and depending on how everything clicks and how everyone plays, and if Scoot Henderson can come back healthy and be effective, if their offense can take some meaningful steps forward under Chauncey Billups, maybe this Blazers team does get over the hump this season and either make the play-in or somehow find a way into the playoffs. Now, I'm not going to bet on that at this point, but I do like their young talent, and it's what prefaces the possibility of making a big trade for any of these three players or other ones who become available at a later date, whether that's Zion Williamson, whether that's LaMelo Ball, or, of course, the Greek freak and Giannis Antetokounmpo, who continues to appear not set on finishing his career in Milwaukee if the Bucks do not remain championship contenders. So what would a trade package for someone like LaMelo Ball look like? First of all, I think the deal would center around Jeremy Grant's contract. Now, you could also argue maybe Drew Holiday would be the player since LaMelo is a guard. Maybe the Blazers would be willing to give up Drew. But I do think from a defensive standpoint and the fact that the Blazers have Toumani Camara, Shaedon Sharpe, and Deni Avdija, that they'd be more than willing to send out Jeremy Grant and probably prioritize the defensive talent that Drew Holiday possesses and try and keep him on the roster. They give up Chris Murray in this as one of those young players. And this is ultimately Charlotte deciding a new direction. The Hornets, new ownership, recent obvious ownership change in the last few years. The Hornets have made a lot of changes, a lot of decisions. Obviously, they've been willing to trade out some talent along the way, prioritizing future draft picks, draft pick control. They have a ton of picks in 2027, one from Miami. They have their own. They have Dallas's 2027 first-round pick. This would be an addendum to that. They're getting the Blazers' first-round pick in 2027. They'd also be getting Orlando's 2028 first-round pick. If you're a Hornets fan, you're slamming your hand on the table saying, no way, I'm not doing this trade. And I understand that, but you have to look at, first of all, the relationships here. Mike Schmitz, who is an assistant GM for the Portland Trailblazers, was one of the first scouts to really stamp LaMelo Ball as a potential top 3 pick in his draft class in 2020. Ultimately, we know what happened. The Hornets did select him 3rd overall in that draft, right behind James Wiseman. So Mike Schmitz, who was already a big believer in LaMelo Ball prior to LaMelo Ball's draft night, now finally brings him to Portland with him. And in return, they're not sending out a lot of crazy talent. Now, you could argue, okay, maybe another draft pick has to be in here. These are the beginning frameworks. It's not super pivotal to say, oh, this is the exact trade. This is the beginning frameworks. And ultimately, even though I like LaMelo Ball a lot, I think he's a very talented player. The discourse around him right now is that he's not a winning player, that his style doesn't promote winning. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with who Charlotte has had around him. He's routinely played with some of the worst center rotations in the entire NBA, non-competitive defensive units across the board, and for some reason LaMelo Ball is the only one who gets blamed for that. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Remember, the Hornets under James Borrego early in LaMelo's career were a pretty competitive, viable team, and that was the last time they had real talent. And since then, they've just punted on pretty much every season that LaMelo's been a part of, and the team hasn't been good. LaMelo has dealt with some injuries as well, which is what maybe makes his trade price a little bit cheaper even. And this is why Portland striking on an opportunity like this would make them a heck of a lot better. It would give them an awesome initiator. Now, depending on how Scoot Henderson plays this season, maybe this isn't the route that they want to go. Maybe they want to look into the front court instead, which could make some sense. But I do think LaMelo Ball would be an awesome get for Portland, especially if they can get him at a relatively cheaper price because of some of those questions and concerns that many around the league have on LaMelo Ball. Another guy with a lot of questions and concerns is, of course, Zion Williamson. He looks like he's in great shape coming into the season. Every other year he plays 60-plus games. Last season he did not. So maybe this year he's destined for an elite season once again. And I do think that's very possible. And if that's the case, he's going to solidify his draft stock once again. But in this deal, you're seeing kind of a unique package, right? This is where New Orleans, who under Joe Dumars has been extremely aggressive. They went out, drafted Jeremiah Fears, traded their first-round pick this upcoming draft for Derek Queen, who I love Derek Queen as a player. It was a questionable decision given how New Orleans' future looks in the short term. We'll see how their season plays out. I definitely don't rule out the possibility of them being more competitive than I'm assuming, but the team is young. We'll see how it all meshes out under Willie Green. But I could see a situation where Portland ultimately tries to push the envelope and go out and get someone like Zion Williamson, who could be that top 10-ish talent when he's actually on the floor. You look at his numbers, you look at his efficiency, the amount of times he gets double teamed when he's actually healthy. It is absurd, and this is the type of player that could revolutionize and change Portland's team dynamic pretty drastically on the offensive end of the floor. The Pelicans here eat Jeremy Grant's contract. They also would take in Scoot Henderson, who back in the day, there was a lot of reporting that New Orleans actually wanted to trade up to draft Scoot Henderson. That ultimately did not happen, but Portland in this situation, sending Scoot Henderson to New Orleans would be something that the Pelicans would actually quite want in this deal. And obviously, then Portland would be kind of indexing and betting on Shaedon Sharpe taking a creation leap, leaning onto Denny Avdia, and then obviously you're going to put the ball in Zion's hands quite a bit too when he's on the floor for you. Chris Murray's in this deal for a salary and young player purpose. 3 second-round picks, 1 first-round pick. This is, again, under the questions and concerns around Zion, his availability, all this, all that. Now, if he has a great year this year, you could probably start seeing this be 2, 3 first-round picks. Whatever that price ends up being, again, the frameworks of these deals are just that. They're just frameworks. It's more about talking through the possibilities, the salaries, how these contracts could match, and why I think Portland, like I've talked about with all of their young talent, their draft pick control, and the need for a top-end player yet kind of pins them as the team to watch, as the sleeping giant in the NBA for the next 18 months or so. Saddiq Bey's in this deal for salary purposes as well. I think this is a deal that makes Portland a lot better. It does make New Orleans take a step back, at least in the short term, but it does give them future draft pick control, a bunch of second-round picks to work out with in the market, and it's obviously a dramatic shift and change in their roster construction. The big one here, and this is the one that everyone's going to want to know about, Giannis Antetokounmpo to Portland. I do think that the writing is on the wall for Milwaukee, and if Milwaukee was smart, I think they would get out ahead of this and trade Giannis right now. That's not going to happen. The Bucks are obviously looking at it from a ticket price, fan interest standpoint, and saying, if we trade Giannis right now, there's not going to be a lot of fan interest in watching our team this season, and that's because the team isn't very good around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yes, they got Miles Turner. He's an awesome big man. I really do like Miles Turner a lot. The rest of the roster is just flat out not that good, and I don't want to read comments about Kevin Porter Jr. I'm sorry, that guy should not be playing rotation minutes if you're trying to win games in the NBA in 2025. It's just the reality. But Milwaukee's trying to do that, so we'll see how it goes for them this year. Giannis is good enough to uplift them. They'll still be a playoff team, I'm sure, especially in the Eastern Conference this year with how injury-riddled it is, but it doesn't look pretty in Milwaukee, and this is the opportunity to maybe get out of that a little bit. In this deal, you get Jeremy Grant. That's a big salary, can move later. You get Scoot Henderson. You get Chris Murray. You get Ryan Rupert. That's a trio of young players. Of course, Scoot Henderson's the legitimate option out of all of those. He would be the starting point guard for Milwaukee today if he was on their roster. I think the Bucks, looking at getting this kind of package, yes, they would want more. They would want more young talent. But if you're Portland, you're saying, look, we're going to give you draft pick control. We're going to give you all of the assets that we can possibly do from a draft component standpoint so that we can still be competitive with a Toumani Camara, with a Denny Avdia, with a collection of young players around Giannis Antetokounmpo upon his arrival. This would reunite Drew Holiday, Damian Lillard, and Giannis Antetokounmpo all together, which would be honestly pretty funny to see. And then in this deal, you're getting a ton of first-round picks, 6 of them to be exact. So yes, you're not getting all of this elite young talent, but you're getting so much draft pick control. And for a team like Milwaukee, who really doesn't have any of that right now, that's obviously a very advantageous outcome from this type of trade. And the important thing is you're getting some of your own first round picks back. You're getting your 2028 first back. You're getting your 2030 first round pick back. So if you look at this and say, okay, a year from now, Milwaukee makes this trade, next offseason, for example, well, all of a sudden that 2028 first doesn't seem too far out. It's within the next 2 drafts. And that 2030 first is an important one for them to get back from a trade standpoint. It opens up some of their future flexibility again. And it also is good when you're a rebuilding team to just have your own draft picks. This is a great beginning point for Milwaukee in starting up a retool, rebuild post Giannis Antetokounmpo, because not only are you getting some of your own draft picks back, you're getting a former top 3 overall pick in Scoot Henderson who would start for you today, but you're also getting 4 additional first-round picks, 1 in 2027, 1 in 2028, 1 in 2029, and then you're getting that far-out 2032 first-round pick via Portland, which could also be super valuable. So there's a good collection of value in here, obviously more so in the form of draft capital than really good young players at this point. But Scoot Henderson is a guy that I'd still be willing to bet on if I was Milwaukee. And then the draft pick control is just so valuable, especially when it comes to getting your own picks back. And that's why I think Portland is in the driver's seat right now. You have those future Bucks picks. I think Giannis is really the guy that they should be circling right now, saying, we can get him here. He has that relationship with Damian Lillard. He has talked about in the past being open to playing in Portland, obviously referenced Damian Lillard at the time. And for the Blazers in general, all of the other stuff lines up. Really good young talent, draft pick control, movable contracts like a Jeremy Grant, like a Drew Holiday, as we outlined earlier. I think this is the deal that makes a ton of sense going forward. So if I had to make a prediction, I would say that I do think Portland is the realistic best landing spot for Giannis when it comes to desperation to make a big trade, the desire to make a big trade, the draft picks lining up to make that kind of trade. Obviously, a team like OKC or San Antonio or Houston, they have the draft picks too. They could go out and make something happen, but we've already seen Houston kind of aggressively go in on Kevin Durant. OKC is going to run into some salary issues with the extensions for Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, so I don't think Giannis is super feasible into that construction from a salary standpoint, which is why Portland, again, with the team control and a lot of their young players, it just makes so much sense, and I think it is the most likely outcome at this point in time. So when it comes to the Blazers' future, I find myself super optimistic about this team. I think they're going to have a pretty good season this upcoming year in 2025, 2026. But then the future, I think, looks incredibly, incredibly bright for them because of their flexibility. And flexibility is the main currency of the NBA, the ability to pivot, change direction, take advantage of an ever-changing market when all of a sudden something you didn't expect happens, when a guy becomes available you weren't expecting. It might not be a player we talked about in this video. Obviously, I gave some predictions on players who might be in LaMelo, Zion, and Giannis, but possibly there's another guy. Who is player number 4? Who is the 5th player possibly that could become available? And Portland, if it's not one of those 3 I've already talked about, is in position to strike on that 4th guy or that 5th guy. And we'll see what ultimately happens, but I think Portland's in a great spot. If you're a Blazers fan, you've got to be extremely excited not only about this upcoming season, but about the long-term direction and future of this team. I think they've done a lot of really nice stuff. I think they've made smart moves on the margins. I think that they've done a pretty good job drafting. And if we see some more internal development from some of their young guys, this team is starting to get ready to compete, and they're getting ready pretty darn quickly. Thank you all so much for watching. Really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.